I never thought a day like that would come. I stood in the middle of the living room, staring at Emily as her words punched right through me. You're not real family. You're just the babysitter who overstayed. For a second, I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened. My hands trembled as my eyes darted toward Jason, my son praying, hoping that he would say something, anything. But he didn't. He just stood there, arms crossed, eyes glued to the floor like a stranger who wanted no part of this. I whispered his name, Jason. But nothing. He didn't even look up. Emily kept going, her voice sharp, cold, cutting deeper than I ever thought words could. This is our home now. You need to move out. You've been here long enough. I felt like the walls were closing in. My ears rang, and for a moment, everything around me blurred. It was as if the floor beneath my feet cracked open, and I was falling straight into a void I never knew existed. This was the same house where I had cooked countless meals, decorated every Christmas, bandaged every scraped knee. The same home where I had rocked Jason to sleep, read him bedtime stories, and waited by the window every time he came home late. And yet now, here I was, being told I didn't belong. I turned to Jason one last time, waiting, begging silently for him to defend me, to stop this madness. But he stayed silent, his lips pressed tight, his gaze fixed somewhere beyond me like I wasn't even there. I could barely choke out the words. Are you really going to let her say this to me? Are you really okay with this? He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, then mumbled, It's for the best, Mom. That sentence broke me more than anything Emily said. My knees weakened, but I forced myself to stay upright. I gripped the back of the couch just to steady myself as a wave of nausea rushed over me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask how this could even be happening. How did the boy I raised with every ounce of love in my soul turn into this man who could stand there and watch me be discarded like yesterday's trash? But no words came out. Only silence. Heavy. Suffocating. For a few seconds, nobody moved. The only sound was the ticking clock on the wall and the pounding of my own heartbeat. Then Emily folded her arms, tapping her foot like she was waiting for me to just disappear. Her eyes scanned me like I was nothing more than an inconvenience she needed to remove. I swallowed the lump in my throat. My lips trembled. My fingers clenched tighter around the couch. And somewhere between heartbreak and disbelief, I realized something. I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't some fight that would blow over. No! This was a decision. A choice they had both made. They had decided that I no longer fit in their picture of family. I took a shaky breath and forced myself to speak. My name is Linda. I'm 63 years old. And until that day, I truly believed that love was stronger than blood. I believed that the years I spent raising Jason, loving him, sacrificing everything for him, meant something. I thought family was about the heart, not DNA. But standing there staring into the faces of the people I loved most, I realized just how wrong I was. And that was the day they erased me. If I'm honest, being a mother was something I dreamed of my entire life. I imagined the late-night feedings, the tiny fingers wrapped around mine, the messy rooms filled with toys, and the joy of watching someone grow into the person they were meant to be. What I didn't imagine was the silence that came after years of trying, after every test, every doctor visit, every disappointment. At 30 years old, I had to face something I never wanted to believe. I couldn't have biological children. I remember sitting in my small kitchen, staring out the window as the reality slowly settled in. It felt like a part of me had been taken away, like the world had decided I wasn't meant to wear the title of mom. But I wasn't ready to accept that. Adoption wasn't a backup plan for me. It wasn't second best. It was a choice I made with every fiber of my being. And the day I met Jason, everything changed. He was just 6 months old, tiny with a full head of dark hair and the biggest, most curious eyes I had ever seen. The moment they placed him in my arms, something clicked deep inside me. A voice whispered, "This is him. This is your son." From that day forward, my life became all about him. Every decision, every plan, every breath I took was for Jason. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, when things got tight. I cleaned houses during the day and waited tables at night. Weekends were for babysitting or tutoring whenever I could find the work. There were nights when my legs ached so bad I could barely stand, but I would still tiptoe into his room just to watch him sleep. I gave up vacations, new clothes, fancy dinners, and every little luxury other people took for granted. My friends would ask why I didn't date, why I didn't try to start a family in some other way. But they didn't understand. I already had my family. It was Jason. Just him and me against the world. I never once reminded him that he was adopted. Not because I was hiding it, but because it didn't matter. He was my son. My flesh or not, my blood or not, none of that changed how fiercely I loved him. To me, he was no different than if he had come from my own body. In fact, I often thought the love I had for him was even stronger because I chose him. I still remember his first steps. He was wearing these little blue overalls, wobbling across the living room like a tiny drunk man, giggling with every step. I clapped so hard my hands stung. And his first words, oh, how they melted me. Mama. Just one word, but it filled every empty space inside me that had ever existed. Every birthday, every scraped knee, every broken toy at Christmas, every math test he cried over, I was there. I was the one helping him glue that science project together at midnight because he forgot it was due. I was the one sewing his Halloween costumes by hand because we couldn't afford store-bought ones. I was the one clapping the loudest at his school plays, even when he was just a tree in the background. There were hard years, more than I like to admit. Money was always tight. Sometimes I had to choose between paying the electric bill or buying him the new sneakers he desperately wanted. And no matter how tired I was, I never let him see it. He always had dinner on the table, always had clean clothes, always had someone waiting to ask how his day was. When he graduated high school, I sat in the front row, tears streaming down my face. It wasn't just pride. It was relief. Relief that we made it, that every sleepless night, every sacrifice, every single thing I gave up had led to that moment. He walked across that stage, and in my heart, he was the greatest thing I had ever done. Even as he grew older, got a job, found his own way, I never once felt like anything between us had changed. We were family. We always had been. I never expected gratitude, never needed him to repay me. His happiness was my reward, his success my purpose. And yet, looking back now, I wonder, did he ever truly see what I gave up for him? Did he ever understand that everything he is, everything he became, was because I loved him more than I ever loved myself? Because to me, he was never adopted. He was simply my son. Always. I should have noticed the shift earlier. Maybe part of me did, but I chose not to see it. When Jason married Emily, I told myself everything would stay the same. We were a family. Nothing could change that. At first, Emily was polite enough. Smiles that never quite reached her eyes. Conversations that felt rehearsed, like she was checking a box rather than trying to connect. She never raised her voice, never said anything outright cruel. But there was this distance, a subtle wall that seemed to grow taller every day. I brushed it off, told myself she just needed time to adjust. After all, blending families can be tricky. It wasn't easy having a mother-in-law living in the same house. I tried to give her space, tried to make things easier. But then the comments started. Small at first, harmless if you weren't really paying attention. One day, as I set the table, she walked by and said, "You're lucky Jason's so kind to let you stay here." It was said with a little laugh as if it were a joke. But it stung in a way I couldn't describe. I smiled, pretended I didn't hear it. Maybe she didn't mean it like that. Maybe I was being sensitive. I told myself that over and over, like some broken record I couldn't shut off. The thing is, Jason started changing too. He was always busy, always tired. Skipping our usual Sunday dinners became more common. Some nights I'd cook his favorite meal waiting for him to come home only to get a text saying, "Sorry, Mom. Running late." "Don't wait up." I'd clean up quietly, packing the leftovers, pretending it didn't bother me. But it did. More than I ever admitted. Conversations that used to flow so easily now felt forced. Short answers, distracted glances. He stopped asking about my day, stopped sharing his own. Sometimes he'd pass me in the hallway and barely look up from his phone. Like I was furniture. I started noticing the little things. A missing chair from the dining room. My favorite framed photo of us quietly replaced with a picture of just the two of them. My baking dishes pushed to the back of the cabinets to make room for her new set. I told myself it was normal. People reorganize when they start a new chapter. It didn't mean anything. But deep down, a whisper started growing louder. Something's wrong. One afternoon, I overheard them in the kitchen. I wasn't eavesdropping. I was walking in to offer them coffee, but I stopped when I heard Emily say, "Honestly, it feels like we're running a charity sometimes." She laughed. He laughed. Jason didn't respond. Just let it hang there. I stood frozen for a second, my hands gripping the coffee mugs, my chest tightening. But when I walked in, both of them smiled like nothing happened. I smiled back, pretended I didn't hear a thing. Maybe it's just adjustment. Maybe it'll pass. I kept telling myself that even when my heart started questioning if that was really true. I started retreating into my room more. Spent less time in the shared spaces. Told myself they needed privacy. That it was the respectful thing to do. I crocheted more. Read books I wasn't really interested in. Anything to fill the silence. The invitations stopped coming too. They went out to dinner, to movies, to little weekend trips. Sometimes they mentioned it afterward, but most times they didn't. I'd hear the front door open, laughter spilling in as they walked past me like I wasn't even there. I noticed Emily had started locking the pantry. Said it was to keep things organized. But deep down, I knew it was her way of marking territory, of reminding me who was really running this house now. Jason barely noticed. Or maybe he did. Maybe pretending not to see was easier for him. Easier than standing up for me. Easier than dealing with the tension growing thicker every day. But no matter how heavy the silence got, no matter how many little jabs or cold shoulders came my way, I kept holding on to hope. I kept believing it was just a rough patch. That it would pass. That the boy I raised would remember. Because that's what mothers do. We hope. Even when every sign tells us to stop. Dinner that night felt different from the start. The air was heavier, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Jason sat across from me, pushing his food around his plate. Emily didn't even bother pretending. Her fork scraped against her dish, sharp, loud, intentional. I tried to keep the conversation going. I asked about their day, how work was, whether they wanted dessert. Jason mumbled something I couldn't quite catch. Emily didn't answer at all. Then, out of nowhere, she set her fork down, looked me straight in the eye, her lips pressed into that tight, fake smile she always wore when she was about to say something cruel. "It's time for you to move out. You don't belong here." For a second, I thought I misheard her. My hand froze halfway to my glass. My heart started pounding so hard I could barely hear anything else. I looked at Jason, searching his face for some sign this was a mistake. A joke. Something. But he wouldn't even meet my eyes. Silence filled every corner of that room. My mouth opened, but no words came out. I swallowed, fighting back the sting behind my eyes, and asked as quietly as I could, "Is that how you both feel?" Jason finally looked up just for a second. His eyes were cold, distant, like he was staring through me. His voice was flat when he said, "It's for the best." It's for the best. Those 4 words shattered something inside me. A crack that had been forming for months split wide open. I stared at him, barely recognizing the man in front of me. The little boy I had rocked to sleep, the teenager I had cheered for at graduation, the man whose wedding I had helped plan. He was gone. My hands trembled in my lap. I gripped the edge of the table just to steady myself, but nothing could stop the shaking inside me. My throat burned. My chest tightened like something heavy had been dropped on it. I wanted to ask how we got here. I wanted to scream to demand why, but my voice wouldn't come. All I could do was sit there and feel everything crumble around me. Emily pushed her chair back and started clearing her plate like she had just finished discussing the weather. Jason didn't move. He just stared at his food like this conversation was some chore he wanted to get over with. And in that moment, sitting at a table where I had shared thousands of meals, birthdays, and memories, I realized I wasn't family anymore. I don't remember walking back to my room. My legs felt heavy, like they were moving on their own while my mind stayed frozen at that dinner table. The silence was louder than anything I had ever heard. I stood in the doorway for a long time, staring at the space I had called mine for years. The walls still held the faint marks from where I once taped Jason's school projects. The dresser, worn and chipped, was the same one I bought when he was 8. Suddenly, everything in that room felt like it belonged to someone else. My hands moved without thinking. I pulled out my old suitcases, the same ones I used when we took our one and only road trip together years ago. They smelled like dust and forgotten memories. Slowly, I began folding clothes, placing them one by one inside. Each shirt felt heavier than the last. I picked up a framed photo from my nightstand. It was the 3 of us on Christmas morning, laughing in front of the tree. For a moment, I almost put it in the suitcase. Then my fingers hesitated. What was the point of holding onto something that clearly meant nothing to them anymore? I set it down, face down, out of sight. With every drawer I emptied, it felt like I was packing pieces of myself. Memories, years of love, years of sacrifice, all reduced to 2 worn suitcases sitting by the door. When I finished, I walked slowly through the house. My fingertips brushed the walls as if I could somehow hold onto it all for just a few more seconds. The smell of the kitchen, the creak in the hallway floor, the dent in the staircase banister from when Jason tripped and fell as a boy. This house wasn't just wood and nails. It was my life. And now it wasn't mine anymore. I opened the front door. The evening air was crisp and cold. I sat down on the front steps, the same steps where I used to wait for Jason to come home from school. My hands gripped my knees as tears spilled down my face, hot and uncontrollable. No one came out. No one checked to see if I was okay. Inside, I could hear laughter, dishes clinking, life moving on. Without me. They didn't just kick me out of the house. They kicked me out of their lives. I sat on that front step longer than I care to admit. Long enough for the evening chill to settle into my bones. long enough to realize that the house behind me, the people behind me were no longer my family. Or maybe they never really were. As I wiped the last of the tears from my face, something shifted inside me. It wasn't anger. Not yet. It was more like a quiet, heavy clarity. A voice in the back of my mind whispering, "Check the papers. Check the facts." I stood up, dusted off my hands, and for the first time in hours, I felt steady. I knew exactly where I needed to go. The next morning, I drove downtown to my lawyer's office. Harold had handled my affairs for years. He was the one who helped me close the deal on this house 15 years ago. Back then, it had been one of the proudest moments of my life. Signing those papers, holding the keys, walking through the front door of a place that was truly mine. When Jason got married, it never once crossed my mind to bring up who the house belonged to. Why would I? Family doesn't keep score. Family doesn't need contracts to prove love. I told myself that over and over. And for years, that belief felt true. But sitting in Harold's office, watching him pull up the documents, I realized something. My kindness had let them forget. Or maybe they had chosen to forget. Harold slid the papers across the desk. He tapped his finger on the top page. Right there. My name, Linda Foster. Sole owner. No co-signers. No shared deed. No strings. The house was mine. Entirely. Legally. Without question. I sat back in my chair and let that reality sink in. The very people who threw me out like garbage were living under my roof. My roof. A slow breath filled my lungs. For the first time in weeks, maybe even months, the crushing weight in my chest started to lift. Not because the pain was gone, but because I finally saw things clearly. I had choices. For a brief moment, I considered confronting them, marching back into that house, slamming the papers on the kitchen table, watching their faces shift from smug to horrified. But no, that wasn't the right way. Not for me. I didn't need to yell, didn't need to fight. I didn't need them to understand what they had done. I just needed to remind them in the simplest way possible of one undeniable truth. The house they called theirs was never theirs. I leaned forward and asked Harold what my options were. He looked over his glasses, smiled in that way old lawyers do when they see someone stepping into their power, and said, "Well, Linda, you can sell it. You can evict them. You can do whatever you want." And just like that, the decision became clear. I was done asking for space, done asking for respect. I wasn't going to beg for a seat at a table I built with my own two hands. I told Harold to start the process. List the house. File the paperwork. Make it official. As I signed the documents, pen scratching against paper, a strange calm washed over me. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't spite. It was simply justice. For years, I believed love was enough, that family was built on memories and sacrifice. But now I understood something I should have seen long ago. Love without respect isn't family. It's a transaction where one person gives and the other just takes. I walked out of that office taller, straighter, stronger. They had no idea what was coming. It didn't take long for Harold to handle the paperwork. A formal notice was drafted, stamped, signed, and delivered. Neat, professional, direct. A simple document that stated in plain black and white the house had been listed for sale and the current occupants had 30 days to vacate. No screaming. No confrontation. No need for ugly words. Just facts delivered through a letterhead with my lawyer's name at the top. I imagined the moment it arrived. Emily checking the mail, casually flipping through envelopes. then suddenly freezing when her eyes landed on that one. I wondered if her hands shook when she opened it, if her face turned pale or burned red with rage. The first call came barely an hour later. Jason. His name popped up on my screen over and over. I didn't answer. My phone buzzed so many times, I finally just turned it face down and let it ring. Then came the emails, one after another. Emily's name filling my inbox. Subject lines in all caps. Messages swinging between disbelief and fury. How dare you? Are you serious? You can't do this. You wouldn't. But I could. And I was. I didn't open a single one. Didn't read a single word. I didn't need to. Their panic spoke louder than anything they could write. For the first time in a long time, I felt something settle inside me. Something strong. Something steady. It was the feeling of taking back control. Not through yelling. Not through begging. Not through explaining my worth to people who chose to forget it. Just through action. Quiet. Clean. Absolute. I made a cup of tea. Sat by the window. Watched the wind move through the trees like it always had. And for the first time in months, I could actually breathe. They didn't see it coming. They never even considered that I had the power to change the story. But the truth was, I always did. I had just forgotten it. Now, they would remember. The day came quicker than I expected. The for sale sign was gone. A moving truck sat parked in front of the house doors wide open, filled with boxes that didn't belong to me or to them. A new family stood by the front gate, smiling, laughing, holding keys in their hands like they were holding a brand new future. I stayed back parked across the street far enough that they wouldn't see me but close enough to watch everything unfold. There was no need for words now. No need for explanations. Jason walked out first. His face was pale, drawn hollow in a way I had never seen before. Behind him, Emily dragged two oversized suitcases, her jaw tight, her shoulders stiff, her eyes darting around like maybe, just maybe, someone would step in and say this wasn't really happening. No one did. I watched them struggle with the last of their things. Suitcases, trash bags, a few plastic bins piled up beside the sidewalk. They looked smaller somehow, less sure, like the weight of everything finally caught up to them. Emily turned back once, glared at the front door like it had betrayed her. Jason never looked back at all. His head hung low, shoulders, sagging hands shoved deep in his pockets. I wondered for just a second if he was thinking about every birthday I ever planned. Every meal I ever cooked. Every time I stayed up late to help him with homework or sat in the bleachers cheering him on. Did any of it cross his mind as he walked away from the house I built the home they thought was theirs? The new family waved to the movers, unlocked the front door, and stepped inside. A little girl, maybe 6 or 7, ran up the steps laughing as she disappeared into what was now her new home. A fresh start for them. And for me. I let out a long, steady breath, not out of anger, not out of satisfaction, but from the simple, quiet relief of knowing it was over. They treated me like I didn't belong. Turns out they were the guests all along. Life has a funny way of showing you what you've been missing. After everything that happened, I realized I had spent so many years building a home for everyone else that I had forgotten how to build one for myself. So that's exactly what I did. I found a small house near the beach. Nothing fancy. Just a little white cottage with blue shutters, a garden out front, and the sound of the ocean close enough that I could hear the waves at night. The first time I stepped inside, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. I started filling my days with things that made me feel alive. I enrolled in a pottery class at the community center. My hands, once used to folding laundry, and scrubbing dishes now shaped clay into bowls, mugs, and little imperfect pieces of art that made me smile. I planted a garden too. Rows of tomatoes, lavender, and sunflowers that turned their faces toward the sun like they had always belonged there. For the first time in decades, I woke up every morning with no one to cook for, no one to clean up after, and no one else's expectations hanging over my head. And it was beautiful. A few months passed. Then one morning, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Jason. He said he was sorry, that things got out of hand, that he hoped I was okay. I stared at that message for a long time, wondering what I was supposed to feel. Anger, sadness, relief, but what I actually felt was nothing. Just clarity. I typed back calm and steady. I wish you well. But my home, my peace isn't yours anymore. Then I put the phone down and stepped outside to water my sunflowers. The old chapter was closed. Completely. No lingering pages. No what ifs. No looking back. I wasn't just starting over. I was starting for the first time for me. If someone ever makes you feel like you don't belong, I hope you remember this. Maybe it's not you who doesn't belong. Maybe it's them. Sometimes the people we give the most to are the ones who forget what we're worth. Sometimes the ones we call family forget what that word is supposed to mean. But that doesn't change your value. It never has, and it never will. You are not defined by the people who fail to see you. You are not broken just because someone treated you like you didn't matter. You are whole. You are enough. You always were. If you've ever been through something like this, or if you're going through it right now, know that you are not alone. Your story matters. You matter. I would love to hear your story in the comments. Maybe someone else needs to hear it too. Maybe it will help them feel less alone, just like sharing mine helped me. If this story touched you, please consider liking the video, subscribing, and sharing it with someone who might need to hear it today. Let's keep reminding each other that even when the world tries to erase us, we get to decide who we are. Because at the end of the day, your peace, your happiness, and your worth, they belong to you. Always.